Solar Flare by Paul L. Bates. My friends are not my friends. He repeated the phrase over and over, like a mantra, driving the dark and deserted road, doing his utmost to ignore the unsettling effect the fading streetlights had upon the oily darkness. His headlights weren't any better. If he trusted his eyes, the pavement immediately in front of the car was awash with a viscous layer that glowed a pale and sticky and sickly green where the beams crossed, as if something unnatural had just rained down from the clouds, had coated the blacktop with something utterly unwholesome. But he knew it had not rained. There was nothing on his windshield. My friends were never my friends. He changed the wording. How could these fragile friendships have become so totally illuminated by this sudden darkness? He added, breaking the rhythm. He felt a need for speed, exercised caution instead. As much as he wanted to be quit of this place, have done with the whole business, he would not risk an accident. The ooze covering the street gradually thickened, like cement drying. It clung to his tires, a malevolent volition making itself known by doing its utmost to hold him fast. He repeated the new variation of the chant, avoided thinking about why he ventured into the night against his comforting proclivities, why he had accepted the insidious invitation against his best judgment. It must end, he reminded himself. One way or another, it will end tonight. One way or the other, I will finish it. He accelerated just enough to compensate for the road's intractable resistance. The decaying structures that lined the shabby main street, depressing during the best of times, had faded while he drove, faded at last from the merest suggestions of light washing across their windows to formless smears, neglected shadows cowering against the greater shadow of the night, no longer subject to the effects of the streetlights or the laws of nature as he understood them. It was too soon to be looking for street numbers, he knew, but still he wondered how under these conditions he could possibly know the place. My friends are automatons. Their actions are all pre-programmed. He drove for several more blocks, or what he thought were blocks. The only clue was streetlights bunched together at likely intersections, one on every corner in lieu of traffic signals, he assumed. Why the hell did they pick a dump like this? Eventually the engine complained. The car slowed. Red and amber warning lights in the dashboard flickered, then faded. He pulled to the side of the street, hoping nothing was parked there, as he could see only the dim lights above him and the shrinking black slick on which he drove. To his surprise, his shoes did not stick to the pavement. Outside the car, his visibility improved, if only slightly. He found a flashlight in the glove box and took it with him. He shined it on the nearest storefront, where it illuminated a swirl of something like fine dust that obscured whatever lay behind it. Cautiously, he climbed the curb he knew must be there, groped the air for obstacles, wondered why he wasn't choking on whatever fluttered in the light beam. Step by cautious step, he approached what he hoped would be a building until his hand felt something moist, cold, throbbing like a frightened animal. He jumped back, swung the flashlight like a weapon, all the while hoping to see a number rending the infernal darkness, willing to accept the likeness of anything recognizable, seeing nothing whatever by its feeble light save the endless swirling specks he could not otherwise sense against a blackness deeper than he thought possible. Turning around, he shined his light back toward his car, but it might as well have been parked miles away. At that awful moment, when even the mantras failed him, he heard a sound. At first, he thought it was music, but it was too steady, too arrhythmic. He turned slowly in a circle, using his ears as he might have used his eyes. After an initial disorientation that terrified him more than the almost intangible darkness, he decided the noise originated further down the street. Taking only the smallest steps, he approached the crackling sound, which grew no louder. He paused again, canting his head from side to side until he decided the sound emanated from his right. Once again, he approached what he assumed to be a continuous wall of storefronts. He touched something firm, not wood nor glass, neither stone nor metal. When he rapped on it with the edge of his fist, the noise stopped. He heard the sigh of a door opening, saw the swirling particles sucked into an even darker void, felt himself drawn along with them. The door shut of its own accord with a soft thud behind him, like a body in a sack landing on the pavement. Here he could taste the air. It was dry, stale, as if the dust of ages had irrevocably settled upon this place. His footfalls rustled, as if he were walking on loose sheets of paper. The crackling began anew, from still deeper within, but his flashlight no longer illuminated anything. He shut it off, pushed it into his overcoat pocket. Refusing to budge, he listened to his sluggish heartbeat, his now labored breath, the steady noise beyond. After what felt like an eternity, a vertical line of the palest light penetrated the gloom, but at what distance he could not judge. It widened until he recognized it as another door opening, as if whoever held the knob was rethinking their action even while performing it. The noise grew louder. "He should be here by now," someone muttered. He recognized Trisha's voice, but not her tone. Cautious, fearful, resigned. He opened his mouth to speak her name, thought better of it, watched the band of pale light shrinking, disappear altogether, not so much as a streak left behind the door. His instincts told him to run, to get as far away from this madness as possible. Run where? He admonished himself. It's all disintegrating. He walked as fast as he dared toward where he guessed he had seen the light, hoping no obstacles would intervene, the rustling sound following him like a dog. I came to end it. I can't end it by running. I can't let it end itself. He found the wall, or what he hoped was a wall. It was anything but smooth, even coarsely hairy in places, cold and clammy to the touch, the dry air notwithstanding. He tasted the bile rising to his mouth. My friends are not my friends. My friends are not my friends. My friends were never my friends. My friends were never my friends. Working his way down the wall, he found a protrusion, not a doorknob exactly, nor even a lever handle. It felt uninvitingly limp, like a small bloated bladder filled with something cool, liquid, yielding. At his touch, the door opened as before. He pushed it inward, hurried after it, his heartbeat accelerating. Someone flung themselves at him, their arms loose around his neck. "You came," Tricia said, her whispered voice racing like his heart. "I'm so glad." She pecked him on the cheek, pulled away as if the contact were painful before he could respond in kind, her footfalls as silent as the night. He saw only the silhouette of a smallish woman, lithe and fearful like a deer, vanishing silently past occasional glimmerings into the shadows beyond. He listened for more footsteps, but they were lost against that other sound, steadily grinding away until he thought he would go mad. Then the static stopped again, and someone cursed beneath their breath. Here and there he noticed cones of light, little more than suggestions, really, and always speckled by whatever gave the stale air its lasting flavor of decay. Within these gossamer cones, black lumps waited, some jostling one another accidentally, as if dying spotlights shined their last on living shadows huddled beneath them. I must make one circuit, he decided. One last circuit before they're gone. Say my goodbyes. End it once and for all. He never realized how heavy his feet could be, how inconveniently gravity could play its only trick, holding him fast like familial ties. He trudged to the nearest pool of glimmering dust. He noticed it was only his footfalls that rustled. He paused before the nearest cone of hovering dust and shadow. The crackling noise began anew, louder than before. What are you doing?" he demanded of the smallish mound of black before him. "Trying to get the news," Bradford growled. "Want to get the latest on the solar flare." He nodded his understanding, knowing it nowise mattered. For a moment, he seriously considered taking full advantage of the situation, of kicking Bradford with all his might, but the effort required was beyond him. The static droned on, while the hunched shadow quivered with anticipation, rose ominously, merged with another shadow he had not noticed before, possibly Rosa. He was suddenly thankful Bradford had nothing left to say. Backing away, he shuffled blindly, occasionally bumping objects he could neither see nor identify, by turns immobile and yielding, each a surprise, each with its own distinct and lasting pain. At the next shimmering pool of dust, two black mounds loomed above him, twin peaks of unending darkness. "Do come closer," Matilda said. She was standing on something he realized, a table, a ladder, a platform, something to give her unwarranted stature in the darkness. Matilda's sister tittered foolishly beside her. "Watch you don't fall off," he advised them, backing away. He would gladly have knocked their perch out from under them if he could have seen it, known it for what it was. Small arms wrapped themselves about his neck again. He felt Tricia's little body press against him. "So glad you could make it," she whispered in his ear. Another peck on the cheek, and she was off again, soundlessly flitting past the pale cones of light, as if she were galloping away from a hungry predator. He recognized Norbert by his puckered lips, his flabby cheeks, the ridiculous shank of hair that refused all ministrations of a comb, a face he remembered like the ass end of some bloated hybrid mammalian slug. Even as a shadow, Norbert stood out. A dozen appropriate insults flitted through his mind. Not one found its way to his tongue. They stood beyond one another's reach. Norbert huddled safely within his cone of shimmering dust. He within night's endless embrace. Their lengthy expressions of mutual loathing and disgust lost against the bleak ambience of the ruin. "Over here!" A lilting voice drew his attention from the next cone. Giselle. "Let me tell you of my immediate needs." "That's enough," he decided. "This is getting me nowhere." He knelt, dug until he found matches in his coat pocket. Sweeping the floor with his hands, he gathered the layer of brittle newsprint on which he shuffled, clutched the individual sheets, balling them, arranging them in a mound. The persistent static veiled the sound of his intentions. He struck a match, held it to the closest wad of faded paper, but it burned only his fingers. He flung it away, struck another match, picked another spot for his conflagration, but the uncooperative newspaper remained steadfastly fireproof. After the third try, he gave up. It took a humiliating eternity of labored shuffling before he found the first door, the one with the clammy bladder for a handle, another equally humbling eternity to find the second. The taste of decay slowly abating beyond the interior. Night was absolute without. Even the pale glow of the streetlights no longer mocked his pitiful attempts at progress. His flashlight was useless as well. He blinked into its pristine glare to satisfy himself it worked at all, but the beam obstinately refused to locate his car. What could mere headlights do against this irresistible onslaught of the void? Were he to find the car anyway? Where would he go now that everything had willingly merged into the eternal night? He stood alone on the sidewalk, the tepid air coagulating steadily around him and within him, listening to the steady sound of that distant static, proof of the predicted solar flare, oddly comforting until it, too, was gone.